Alabama, 1861. The world stood on the edge of civil war, but deep inside one plantation, another kind of war was about to unfold. A war of shadows, secrets, and one man's quiet, burning rage. For years he was forced to serve, stripped of freedom, treated as property. But when tragedy struck, when those he loved were taken from him, he devised a plan so daring, so calculated, that it would forever stain his master's legacy in blood. This is not just a story of survival. It's a story of revenge. If stories like this grip you as much as they gripped us while uncovering them, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves history's hidden chapters. Let's dive in together. Chapter 1. Chains of the South Alabama, 1861. The air was thick with tension, as if the soil itself knew a storm was coming. Cotton fields stretched endlessly, a sea of white that masked the darker truth behind its beauty. The state stood as one of slavery's beating hearts, its economy thriving on the backs of those who were never free. Life here was a contradiction. Grand mansions with white pillars stood tall, while only yards away, cabins of rough wood held the people whose labor built those estates. For the enslaved, every sunrise was a sentence repeated. Work began before dawn, voices hushed, hands blistered, backs bent beneath the southern sun. And yet, within these daily rituals, a quiet resistance lived. A stolen glance at the horizon, a whispered prayer at night, a memory of life before bondage. All became lifelines of survival. By 1861, whispers of war echoed through the South. Talk of secession buzzed in town squares, and the promise of battle loomed like thunder on the horizon. But for those in chains, the Civil War wasn't some political debate. It was a question of existence. Would war mean freedom or only harsher control? And in one Alabama plantation, tucked away behind endless rows of crops, lived a man who carried these questions every single day. He was forced to bow his head, to obey commands barked at him as though he were less than human. Yet inside him, something stronger than fear was taking root. Call it defiance, call it hope, call it the slow brewing storm of revenge. It was there, waiting. Because while his master believed he controlled every detail of his life, he could never control the thoughts forming in silence. And soon, silence itself would become his deadliest weapon. Chapter 2. A life in shadows. Day after day, he lived in the shadows of a world that denied him even the simplest freedoms. His name was spoken only when orders were barked, his worth measured in labor, never in humanity. To outsiders, he was invisible, a faceless figure among countless others, bending under the weight of cotton sacks, swinging tools from dawn until dusk. But behind the silence there was a man who remembered, who dreamed, who carried fragments of a life that slavery tried to erase. Family was his anchor. In the cramped quarters where enslaved people slept, he found moments of warmth that no overseer could take away. The laughter of children, the comfort of a shared meal, the whispered stories passed down by elders. These were sparks of light in a darkened existence. Every night, as the whip marks burned and exhaustion weighed heavy, it was those connections that reminded him he was more than property. He was a husband, a father, a son, but shadows were dangerous too. Every act of kindness had to be hidden. A stolen scrap of food, a secret visit to another cabin, even a whispered hymn could invite punishment. The plantation was a world built on surveillance and suspicion, and still, small acts of defiance kept hope alive, like pressing a carved token into a child's hand, or humming a forbidden song that carried memories of freedom. Inside him, the tension grew. Each injustice carved deeper, each humiliation cut sharper. Yet he waited, biding his time. Patience became survival, but also a weapon. Because in the shadows, where the master never looked, he was beginning to imagine a different kind of future, one not handed to him, but taken. Chapter 3. The master's reign. Every story of rebellion is shaped by its oppressor, and this one was no different. The master of the plantation was a man who wore his power like armor, convinced of his own superiority. His estate was his kingdom, his wealth built on the sweat of others, and he ruled with the certainty of someone who believed the system would never break. He was the kind of man who measured respect by obedience. To him, those in bondage weren't people but assets, rows in a ledger, tools in a field. He spoke of them as though they were livestock, stripping away humanity with every word. And yet, what he could never comprehend was that cruelty breeds memory. Each order barked, each punishment inflicted, planted seeds of resentment he thought would never grow. To his peers, he was a model of success. At social gatherings, he boasted of harvest yields and the discipline of his labor force. He strutted through town in polished boots, his head held high as if the entire world validated his position. Neighbors saw the charm, the confidence, the prosperity. They didn't see the bruises hidden beneath clothing, the tears shed in silence, the lives reduced to nothing behind his mansion's walls. For those forced to live under him, his presence was inescapable. His voice carried across the fields like thunder, his shadow long and heavy. And yet arrogance blinded him. He believed fear was enough to keep people silent forever. He mistook submission for loyalty, obedience for weakness. But in the quiet corners of the plantation, in whispered conversations he would never hear, another truth was being written. His reign might have felt unshakable to him, but the foundation beneath it was beginning to crack, quietly, dangerously, and beyond his sight. Chapter 4. The breaking point. For years, he endured. The lash of the whip, the sting of insults, the endless grind of labor, all became part of survival. But every man has a line that cannot be crossed, and for him, that moment arrived with devastating force. It began with loss. The master, in a fit of anger, punished not just him, but someone he loved, someone who had been his anchor in a life of chains. Some say it was his wife, others whisper it was a child. What mattered was the cruelty of it, an act so senseless, so brutal, that it shattered the fragile balance he had built inside himself. Grief turned quickly to rage. He could not weep openly. Tears were dangerous. Instead, he carried his pain in silence, each heartbeat pounding like a drum of vengeance. Nights that once offered brief comfort now stretched long and sleepless. He replayed the moment again and again, feeling the humiliation sharpen into resolve. For the first time, obedience felt impossible. Every order from the master echoed like mockery. Every reminder of chains felt like fire pressed to his skin. He began to imagine what life would be without this man, without his cruelty, without his shadow. Those thoughts, once fleeting, now rooted themselves deeply. The breaking point had arrived. He was no longer a man merely enduring slavery. He was a man preparing to fight back. And though he could not strike openly, though rebellion meant death if discovered, something far more dangerous than anger was now guiding him. Patience, calculation, the will to wait for the perfect moment. And in that patience, a secret plan was about to be born. Chapter 5. A secret plan revenge, if rushed, is suicide. He knew that. To strike openly would mean death within minutes. Overseers carried whips, guns, and the law itself. But in silence, in secrecy, he began to craft something no one would suspect. The plan was not born in a single night. It grew slowly, like roots beneath the soil. He studied routines. When the master rose, when meals were served, when the household slept. Every detail mattered. To everyone else, he was just another shadow moving through the fields, but inside his mind, a deadly map was taking shape. Food became the key. In a world where enslaved people were often forced to prepare their master's meals, opportunity lived in the kitchen. He noticed what the master favored, what he consumed most often, what no one else dared to touch without permission. If freedom could not be taken with a blade, perhaps it could be stolen with something far less obvious, something that seeped slowly, invisibly into the body. But patience was more than strategy. It was survival. He could not show anger, could not let even a flicker of hatred slip across his face. To the master he remained obedient, silent, loyal. Inside, however, every bow of the head, every "yes, sir," was a mask. The brilliance of his plan lay in its invisibility. A blade leaves a wound, a struggle leaves witnesses. But a master who grows sick, who weakens over time, that would draw suspicion in 100 directions, and none would point to him. The plan was set. All that remained was the moment to begin. And once the first step was taken, there would be no turning back. Chapter 6. Poison in the veins. It began quietly, almost imperceptibly. A subtle hand in the kitchen, a careful touch to the master's plate. Nothing rushed, nothing careless. Just a whisper of danger hidden inside the very thing the master trusted most, his food. At first, there was no sign. The master ate as he always did, boasting loudly, drinking heavily, confident in his invincibility. But days later, whispers of weakness appeared. He complained of headaches, of sudden fatigue that forced him to retire early. To his household, it seemed like nothing more than the strain of business or the heat of the southern summer. To him, the man behind the plan, it was proof that his weapon was working. The brilliance was in the patience. He didn't strike once and risk exposure. Instead, he stretched it over time. Small doses, carefully measured, delivered when no one could trace them. The master grew slower, less steady on his feet. His voice, once booming, cracked with strain. His temper flared more easily as illness gnawed at his body. Servants and overseers whispered among themselves. Was it bad luck? A curse? The war? The master himself dismissed the talk, too arrogant to believe someone within his household could touch him. That arrogance was his undoing, and all the while the man watched. He showed no hint of satisfaction, no slip of a smile. He served when called, bowed when commanded, all while knowing the poison was spreading like a secret fire through the master's veins. Each passing day brought the plantation closer to collapse. And each passing day his silence grew more dangerous, because once suspicion stirred, silence alone might not save him. Chapter 7. Whispers of Suspicion. The master's decline did not go unnoticed. At first it was dismissed as fatigue, the kind that comes with managing fields, debts, and the constant murmur of war in the distance. But when weeks turned into months and his strength failed to return, suspicion began to creep into the walls of the plantation. The household staff whispered in corners, their voices hushed but urgent. Some claimed it was the Lord's punishment, others feared a curse. The overseers, suspicious by nature, began to cast sharp eyes at the enslaved. Every gesture, every movement was scrutinized. Who handled the food? Who lingered near the master's chambers? Who might be bold enough to try something so unthinkable? Fear spread like smoke. The master himself grew paranoid. He accused servants of negligence, of betrayal, his temper fraying with each passing day of weakness. He lashed out at those nearest, punishing small mistakes with disproportionate cruelty. His illness did not humble him. It made him more dangerous, more desperate to reassert control. And yet, no one dared point directly at the one who orchestrated it all. His face remained calm, his service steady. He was invisible in plain sight, the obedient figure no one thought twice about. That invisibility became his shield. Still, rumors have a way of taking on lives of their own. The talk of poison slipped from the cabins into the town, whispered in markets and church pews. A master, sick without explanation, was a scandal waiting to spread, and scandals demanded answers. Inside the plantation gates, the tension was unbearable. The walls seemed to close in. Everyone was watching, everyone was waiting, and he knew the price of revenge was coming due. Chapter 8. The price of revenge. Revenge is never free. Every choice carries a cost, and on the plantation, the price began to reveal itself. The master's body weakened beyond denial. He could no longer command the fields with the same booming authority, no longer walk with the same swagger. His decline rippled outward, first through the household, then across the community. And when a man of power falters, fear demands someone to blame. Suspicion thickened into accusation. Overseers grew ruthless, punishing the enslaved for the smallest infractions. Whips cracked harder, chains tightened, and the air grew suffocating. To many, the suffering felt endless, as though vengeance had brought not freedom, but even greater torment. For him, the weight was heavier still. Each night he wrestled with the knowledge of what he had set in motion. Freedom had always been a dream whispered under breath, but this was dangerous reality. Was it worth it? To see the master weakened, to know justice had finally seeped into his veins, or had he doomed not only himself, but those around him? Some say he was discovered, dragged into the light, and punished with brutal finality. Others whisper he escaped, vanishing into the chaos of a country tearing itself apart by war. And then there are those who believe his fate was quieter, that he remained, carrying the secret of his revenge until his last breath, unspoken but undeniable. What is certain is this: his act changed the rhythm of the plantation forever. It was proof that even in the tightest grip of oppression, silence could carry rebellion. and patience could become a weapon sharper than any blade. But history is rarely kind to rebels in chains. The question is not whether he struck his master down, but whether he lived long enough to savor it. Chapter 9. Echoes in history. His act of defiance did not happen in isolation. Across the South, enslaved men and women found ways, small and large, to push back against the system that sought to crush them. Some ran, vanishing into forests and swamps, chasing the faint promise of freedom. Others slowed their work, broke tools, or passed secret messages through songs sung in the fields. And a few, like him, took the path of direct revenge, silent, dangerous, and unforgettable. Alabama in 1861 was a land on edge. The Civil War had begun, and with it came whispers of emancipation. Union soldiers marching deeper into the South were not just an invading army. For many enslaved people, they were a living symbol of hope. News traveled fast, often carried in fragments. A plantation burned here, a master killed there, a slave ship seized far away. Each story fed the quiet belief that the world might finally be shifting. Acts like his sent ripples through this larger storm. They were reminders that slavery was never accepted in silence, never endured without resistance. History books often glorified generals and presidents, battles and treaties. But behind those headlines were countless untold stories. Stories of individuals who risked everything to claim even a fragment of justice. The truth is, we may never know his exact fate. But his defiance belongs to a hidden chorus of resistance, one that echoed through fields, cabins, and rivers all across the South. It was the sound of a people refusing to be erased, even when their names were lost to history, and those echoes remind us that resistance doesn't always come with fanfare or armies. Sometimes it comes quietly. One man, one plan, one act that strikes fear into the heart of power itself. Chapter 10. Legacy of defiance. Stories like his rarely survive in the official record. They linger instead in whispers, in family lore, in the uneasy silences of history books that prefer triumphs over uncomfortable truths. Yet even in fragments, his story carries a powerful lesson. He was one man, bound by chains, denied every right that makes a life whole. And still, he refused to let cruelty go unanswered. His plan was dangerous, his act unforgiving, but it was also undeniable proof of agency in a world that sought to strip him of it. In striking back, he carved a place for himself beyond the role of victim. He became something far more dangerous to his master, a reminder that power is never absolute. The legacy of defiance is not just about revenge. It is about survival, dignity, and the human spirit's refusal to surrender. His story reflects a larger truth, that in the darkest systems of oppression, people always found ways to resist. Some through quiet endurance, some through flight, and some, like him, through direct, unflinching retaliation. Today, when we look back, we are not just remembering one act of rebellion. We are remembering a thread in a much larger tapestry, woven by countless lives, countless choices, countless risks taken in the pursuit of freedom. And maybe that is his true legacy, not whether he lived or died after his act, but that his defiance continues to echo more than a century and a half later. It forces us to ask hard questions about justice, about power, and about the lengths to which people will go when stripped of everything but their will to fight back. Because sometimes, even in silence, one man's revenge can change history, and so, the story of one man's secret act of vengeance fades into history's shadows, but its weight lingers. His name may be lost, his fate uncertain, yet his defiance still speaks louder than silence. It reminds us that even in the darkest corners of oppression, sparks of resistance refuse to die out. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about the hidden struggles of the past, then don't let it stop here. Share it, talk about it, keep these voices alive. Make sure to like this video, subscribe for more untold histories, and hit the bell so you never miss the stories that history tried to bury. Until next time, stay curious, stay questioning. Next time, stay curious, stay questioning.